it and bolting it on. I repeat that again. Her motto is all about building it in and not bolting it on. Michele Guel.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. The program committee asked me to specifically fight all forces of the coma. So we will be awake. It is typically a difficult session after work, so I'm happy to be here today amongst an esteemed group of speakers, and I'm going to talk to you about security risk and mitigation approaches. Like, I'm the one that's supposed to solve all the problems that everybody talked about. So we'll just see about that. The benefits of speaking in the afternoon is that you get to tie together things that speakers spoke about earlier in the day. The challenge is that maybe they already spoke about it. So this may be a short talk, but we'll see. So before I get started, I just want to remind you what Karen said this morning. By the year 2025, there will be approximately 50 to 75 billion devices on the internet. So that's a whole lot of security stuff to secure. Let's talk about a typical connected day in 2017. And I have my notes. And as Ms. Ko, I'm probably going to pronounce that wrong, said, there's an app for that. So in the spirit of there's an app for that, let's talk about our connected day in 2017. During the night, you receive a gentle wake-up alarm from your Fitbit or smartwatch that alerts you that your baby diaper is full and it's time to change the baby diaper because it's sensor-enabled. You head back to bed and you later receive a wake-up call from your smart alarm clock. Potentially, your traffic monitoring app senses the traffic pattern and can adjust your smart alarm clock to let you either sleep in or get up earlier. You get up, you turn on the lights, you go into the bathroom, and you have an if-then this app policy that turns on your coffee maker downstairs. You're out the door on your morning drive to work, right? And so your daily advisor app alerts you to meetings, adjustments, and syncs your mail filter app, and you receive alert that you have 3 high priority messages. Your text-to-voice app reads those messages while you drive. You pull into the parking lot of your connected building, right? And your parking space app alerts you that there's a parking space on the northeast end of the parking garage in space 234. Right? As you approach your building, perhaps it's Cisco, right? Our Cisco Smart Security Monitoring system uses facial recognition. You don't have to badge in. Welcomes you to the building in the morning and the doors magically unlock. Right? Your daily advisor app tells you that your 8 a.m. meeting has moved to the 3rd floor in the Billy Joel conference room. It's not on the 3rd floor, but y'all don't know that. And your smart connected space app gives you the directions in case you're not familiar with the building layout. We actually have one of these apps at Cisco. You walk into the room, the lights come on, the TP session is enabled, and you're in your meeting automatically. You didn't have to do anything. In the afternoon, your smart kid tracker app alerts you that your kids are home. Your home security monitoring system is automatically activated. The door's locked, the cameras are on, you know your kids are safe. At the end of the day, your smart traffic alert pattern app alerts you to the changing traffic pattern, so you can either leave work a little bit early or leave work a little bit later, depending on the traffic. On the way home, your smart pantry app alerts you that you're out of milk and peanut butter, probably because your hungry kids are making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and drinking chocolate milk. Once you're home, your smart fitness app alerts you still have 3,000 steps to go. As you're cooking dinner, your glucose monitoring app alerts you to your sugar count and gives you specified potential carbohydrate and protein intake. After dinner, you're on the walk with your husband. You complete your 3,000 steps, and your smart fitness app says, "Attaboy, good job, great job." As it nears time for your bedtime, your daily advisor app alerts you to changing meeting times, adjusts your smart alarm clock, and gives you a recommendation on what time to go to bed. Totally, potentially could happen. Doubtful in 2016, there will be early adopters, our previous speaker who likes the smart connected home, but totally possibly to happen in 2017. So just how connected were we in that? Can you count the number of applications, interfaces, providers in that personal world? What about when you got to work? If you work at Cisco, you know we have lots of connected stuff all over the place. A couple of the speakers referenced the number of applications they have on their smartphone. I'll tell you, I only have 67. And 20-something of those came with the phone. I'm not a big downloader of apps because the privacy is such a concern on them, right? So do you actually know the background traffic of everything that's happening? It's a bit scary. on what's happening in there. You don't really know, right? So what is your security confidence level in all those interactions? Do you know where your data jumped to and what data lake? Earlier in the day, a gentleman in the back asked about, well, what are your thoughts about, I enter my data somewhere and suddenly it's in halfway around the world. You can't recapture that data once it leaves, although in some nations, there is a privacy that says you have the ability to be forgotten. Do you even know how many data lakes your data is in today? And I would venture to guess the answer is not. Vince Cerf in his talk said, fundamentally, things need a way to be configured so that you can only talk to things that you want them to talk about. What's the white list there? Or maybe it's a black list, whatever the two smaller ones or those are, right? So what are some challenges within that? Lots of folks talked about all the benefits, and there are great benefits. There definitely are. But obviously, we're going to have a speaker coming up, I think, next, right, about loss of privacy. The privacy ramifications in the Internet of Everything are just absolutely huge. But we've all already been compromised. All of our data has been out there. We've been hacked. Michele Guel, who's our new Chief Privacy Officer at Cisco, a lawyer by trade, been in the privacy industry a long time. She talks and she says both of her kids' social security numbers were hacked way before they were born. And there's this whole industry of parents paying money to have their identities of their children cleaned up because their SSNs were compromised before they were born. The IoT is just only going to increase that problem. The one thing I like about do we lose some of our humanness or humanity? When there's an app for everything and we don't necessarily have to think, is there a loss there? Or when you see this all the time, you go to a restaurant, you go somewhere else, everyone on the table's on the smartphone. There's no interactive conversations with the people at the table. So many of us talked about the challenges, so I don't really need to drain these slides, but I think we all agree that the Internet of Everything brings new potential attack vectors that we hadn't thought about. It's combining data in ways that we've never even thought about, so we don't know what the ramifications of that may be. When I was in college in the early 80s, and I'm 50 plus, right? I'll be 54 this year, I think. I lose count. For those of you who were in the college in the 70s and 80s, right, your ID number was your SSN. They posted your grades by your SSN on the door in the hallway. It was something you are, right, on that. And so it's a challenge. We have the exponentially growing attack landscape, and how do we actually get around that? So we're going to talk about some of this. So I use this is one of my quotes. I'm sure I'm not the first person, but I always say almost everything that can be used for good can be used for bad. History has shown us that. Somebody thinks of something, wow, this is awesome, we need to do this, it's going to save us money, it's going to increase productivity, but it also increases our ability to get hacked. So the question is, are we ready? Are we really ready to enter the Internet of Everything? And this is from the ISACA Risk Reward Barometer. In the opening talk, Karen Rose talked about, and several people even vent, that, this has been happening. It's just, it was under the radar. The IoT has been happening for years, but it's under the radar because people are innovative. Well, how do I connect my toaster? Or how can I connect the things at my home, right? When you think about smartwatches were hit big in the industry in 2014, but hello, they were really around in 1980 or 1990. I didn't know that. I was doing a research paper for school. I'm currently in the master's program, and I was like, wow, where was I all this time? So I don't think we're ready, and I think we're challenged because it's moving at warp speeds. If you're a business, you want to move fast, you want to be agile, you want to do it with speed, you want to do it with efficiency, right? This whole concept of continuous delivery, and yet we need to do it securely. We don't necessarily know how to do that well. Still, you hear a lot of people when they talk about security is a joint effort. It's not the InfoSec team responsibility. We can't do it as a single entity. Everybody has to think about security. About 4 years ago, I did a talk that is going to be one of the 3 R's. Read, write, and security when you're in school. They need to start teaching kids this stuff in kindergarten. We talked about data. You were into zettabytes of data already. In something like 2020, there's going to be 7 or 8 zettabytes or 19 zettabytes of data. That's a whole lot of data. And architectures are still, oops, I went the wrong way. Architectures are still lagging. So we're here at the Computer History Museum, right? We're right next door to NASA Ames Research Center, which is where I got my start in the information security field. So in a matter of proportions, and the statistics here were from Cisco in their 2016 annual security report. And I know a lot of companies produce security reports, and I read different companies. I read Cisco's as well. And so all the questionnaires and the data they collect from devices, 92% are running, these are Cisco devices, are running vulnerable versions because the people haven't upgraded, right? It's just sitting out there. Or 32% were end of sale. Cisco doesn't even make that anymore, but because it's still running, we're going to have it out there. And some of them were end of life. So you have this total aging infrastructure. And part of that problem is someone's got to fund the upgrade. There's no money tree next door with crispy $1 million bills, and we can just kind of swap and lift and shift out. That would be awesome, right? We would never be lagging, but the reality is we are. Now, to compare and contrast, so 27 years ago when Morris did this little experiment, and it wasn't about creating malware, it was about, can I see how big the internet is? In 1988, the internet was about 70,000 devices. Think about what Vint Cerf said about, he worries about the 100,000 refrigerators launching a DDoS attack on Bank of America. That's just bigger than we were in 1988. The reason I bring up the Morris thing and talk about lagging infrastructures is somewhere in this building, I didn't find it at lunch, there's a display about the Morris worm incident. I worked at NASA Ames. We were impacted. We had 150 hosts that were infected. The total incident cost, don't laugh, $73,000 and 12,000 person hours. But the lagging infrastructure is not new. In 1988 and 89, when the report was published, I wrote the security recommendations. There was a list of 16 recommendations. We're talking 1988, 89. Today, 6 of those are still things that companies don't do well. Change your passwords regularly, right? And there's some other things in there. We're still lagging. Trailing security posture. It's decreasing, right? 64%, there was a higher confidence level that said, hey, I'm doing security well. In 2015, now it's dropped, 59%. And as we increase, as our attack surface increases, I think it's only going to go down. So here's where I get to say what she said earlier. Right? So great talk about DNS because DNS is a blind spot. I don't see her. She's still here? Okay, DNS is a total blind spot. Again, these numbers are from the Cisco security report. Monitoring of DNS is not common, right? At Cisco, I have to look at this so I get my numbers right. We log about 4.7 billion DNS records daily. Give or take a few billion, a few point billions. Also, another number, we collect 15 billion net flows. And because it is an early warning signal. So this is one thing you can do. I have what we're doing next. But this is one thing you can do is about, if you're not doing any passive DNS monitoring, you're not watching, you're missing a lot of what's happening with the attacks. Right, about 5 years ago, our incident response team realized that DNS was a big problem. We weren't doing it, there weren't vendor tools out at the time, the industry was very young, so they kind of rolled their own. Today, that roll their own software and passive DNS monitoring and the RPC, it's not reverse policy zoning, it was called, account for about 20% of our defenses per day. That's how big DNS is. That's a challenge. So we've had enough problems with IoT that we have common attack patterns that have emerged for the last couple years, right? And these are, you can go out to the OWASP top 10, they have the top 10 IoT patterns. And I think many of us that are spoken today have talked about these, right? Endpoints, you have all kinds of endpoints all over the place. And still, just like if you read the OWASP top 10 and something else, talk about web applications, you see the same vulnerabilities on there year after year after year. SQL attacks, right? Buffer overflows, cross-site forgery requests. Well, hello, these IoT devices have web interfaces. Communication channels, right? We talked about the variety of protocols that are out there today. So these are all common attack patterns that's a challenge. But the real challenge is us as consumers in the industry, because we demand new technology. We get excited about new technology and we adopt new technology before it's really ready. And again, in another research paper for our master's, or I was doing a smartwatch, and think about there's an application for everything, right? Do you think these are high risk or super cool? The Mayo Clinic, their doctors use Apple smartwatches. They have an app called Mayo Synthesis that, so they know when a patient's coming into the door, they get the patient summary on their smartwatch, on their records, and it's like more connected. And it goes up to the Mayo Clinic, it's connected to the cloud and all that sort of stuff. Is that super cool, or does that kind of make you like, well, I don't know about that one? Or what about Starbucks? How many people use the Starbucks smartwatch app? Come on. You run by and you can kind of do your order of your latte. What about these smart door locks? The speaker before me, wanted to do his PowerPoint there. So we use them before it's ready. What about the do button on the smartwatch? The if then, this, that, it's the easy button of the whole IoT, the do button. Let's create a policy for that. So as consumers, we really have to do our part. We can all do our part. The first thing is, know what the hell privacy options these devices are using. Like with the smart TV, I thought that was an excellent thing. And it's an Android device. That was kind of a big miss, but probably most smart TVs are Androids. Right? So all right, let's turn everything on. They didn't even think about putting privacy options into the one but Kit Kat, right? And then Marshmallow had more, but that was like Rev 5. And so now you can start to do some with privacy. So as a consumer and as an employee, know what you're getting into. Just don't download any app because there's an app. Check out the privacy ramifications of that app. Better yet, does your company have a policy about, well, do we allow smartwatches? We have the whole mobility on the iPhone. What about people want to get the mail on their watch or their spaceship? They want to pull their spaceship up to the building. All right. Also, as consumers and employees and companies, we can refuse to use these devices if they don't have common standard security capabilities in them. And say, well, it's okay, it's super cool, I'm going to use it. We have to be forceful about what we choose to do. So really, can we catch up in this race of the Internet of Things, of the Internet of Everything? And sitting today listening to this, I came up with another quote because a lot of great speakers. To me, the Internet of Everything is a marathon of intractable proportions. It's not going to happen fast. Think about Morris, Worm, 1988, and here we are in 2016, and we still have organizations not doing basic block and tackle. So let's think about some things that we can do, right? So this is about solving some of the security issues. There's a lot of things I could talk about, but I really want to talk about things that you can take away and think about implementing today in your organization. How can we go the next step to solving some of these problems? And the first is that we have to be better, faster, and agile at basic block and tackle. Think about Morris. So all you people out there that have connected homes, that's a great place to start. Anyone with Wemo devices? About more Wii moments? Zero security, absolutely zero. So I challenge you, if you have connected home, install one of the network cool monitoring apps on your iPhone. No, that's an app I did install. I did deinstall it. But I was surprised at all kinds of stuff that I could capture just on my smartphone, and I didn't have to have anything else. But thinking about smartphones, downstairs they had the Cray supercomputer. I worked on those when I was at NASA Ames, right? The smartphone today has more computing power than that Cray supercomputer. So, you can do all kinds of good stuff with it. So how do we get better at basic block and tackle? Think about extending your security team. At Cisco, just within InfoSec, we have 240 some odd people on the security team. We have extended security team people who are leaders. We have some that are doers. Overall, we have approximately somewhere in the order of 350, 400, more like 400, 450 people that have some aspect of responsibility security in their job, right? You need people, you need boots on the ground. And IoT, you need boots on the ground in every organization because what you're trying to do is move security closer to the business. You want to think about that whole business life cycle. When there's a new deal, maybe it's a new product, a new services, right, a new consulting product, an internal, think about all things that run your infrastructure. What is cradle to grave? He mentioned cradle to cradle. Cradle to grave, but getting security involved from the beginning. A seat at the table. Design privacy in. Design security in to handle this sort of stuff. And so you need the boots on the ground in the different organizations to do that. And if you think the InfoSec folks are going to solve the problem, you're wrong. Right? So I'm the original security person at Cisco. I was booted out of the team after 11 years. I went to work in HRIT, a real eye-opener. Right? I went from the ivory tower where we make all the policies to in the trenches where the reality of getting stuff done. And so you want people, boots on the ground in those organizations that know how it works under the hood. They know where the data's leaking. They know where the unofficial wireless access points. I was going to say the cable over the door, but that doesn't apply anymore. It did in the olden days, right? They know all the back doors are really making the business run. I don't have to get a data feed from the official people because I know Paul gets this particular feed and I can get it to him. So Paul gets the official feed. He gives it to Mary, who gives it to Peter Paul. Peter gets the feed, he gives it to Paul, who gives it to Mary. You have the in-hop data problem. You don't know where your data is. You don't know who's using your data. But when you have boots on the ground, security leaders and security doers, the intractable problem becomes a little bit smaller. You need to expand your visibility of your risk posture. Do you really know? Right, the Cisco security report said, it said there was a decline on how well people thought they were doing. Can you measure it? What are you measuring today? Do you know how many stack vulnerabilities you have in your organization if you were to run a Qualys? Or what about if you were to run NetSeal? Or what about if you were to hire Uber pen tester? How many hundreds of thousands of issues are they going to find? And is it really about how many issues can you find? Or is it about can they actually find anything because we have good security? So there's different types of metrics and measures you should know. I list a few here. Service level. What are your infrastructure I talked about? What about coverage? How many people do you have in the different aspects of the organization who are passionate about security and they actually have a responsibility to think about end-to-end security of their service area? One way to measure and foundational is the CIS security controls, originally called SANS Top 20. Now, when this first came out, I wasn't a big fan. Some of you that know me may know or have heard of me. I've been with SANS since the inception. Spoke at their first conference. I've done a lot with SANS. Al and I created the Network Security Conference. Net, when it first came out, I wasn't a big fan. This is in version 6 now. I was a fan by like version 4. 20 categories of 192 controls. When they released version 6, they actually released a way that you can do repeatable scoring. I was working with version 5 because we're trying to operationalize this. We're not trying, we are operationalizing this at Cisco. It's a baseline, pick your favorite whatever. There's multiple things that you can choose, but make it repeatable. Do you have an owner? Going back to coverage in all areas at Cisco, we can go down to each of the 190 some odd controls and I know which group within global infrastructure services, and I know which person does that particular task. And we can tie it in, because when you exponentially increase the number of things, you have to be able to manage these things and measure how well that you're doing them. Speaking of that, how do we actually minimize the attack surface? There's these bazillion types of things out there, right? 5 minutes and I'll go faster, right? We have to be able to do this. So here's some keys to minimizing the attack surface. Build trustworthy products. There's a number of companies that have been doing this. Cisco is one, Microsoft is one, others. We actually have, a trusted chip. Do you have anti-counterfeit technology? Do you have a secure boot ROM on there? There's a whole idea that you should have trusted DNA of an application, of a service, of a device that I can trust it. Create a trusted device policy for your endpoints. You may have one now for bring your own device. Now you bring your own sensor. That's just another endpoint. It's going to be encompassed in your trusted device policy. A big one here, decrease mean time to detect and mean time to contain. Many people are lagging in this area. The Pony-Mon report states that about mean time to detect is about 100 to 200 days because they don't have the monitoring infrastructure. They don't have the people to look at the stuff. Cisco has done a lot of work in this area, and our CSERT team, our mean time is down to about 17 hours. Now, some things may take longer, that's the mean. Things that you can do, right? You really need to mature your monitoring capability, and you'll get the slides so you can see this, but really it's about, are you collecting from all the areas that you need to collect, including DNS, right? Are you collecting net flows? Do you have the stuff from the data loss prevention, right? Do you have all the different things in your environment to detect it? Are you feeding it into a central system? Are you actually creating playbooks that says, here's how we answer this? Do you have an automated way to say, hey, I recognize that indicator of compromise. I have a playbook that says do these 5 things. I have automation that puts it to this queue. It gets to an engineer sooner. It gets resolved sooner. It moves the needle on that. It becomes more important when we have these things. Can we fingerprint them? Can we scan for them? And they're not on IP, but you can collect the information from an IP level. There are some startups doing this. I heard a presentation from one last week. It was pretty cool. They talk about it. One thing you need to do. Last one, 2 real quick. I'm running out of time. So manage and control your data. I like what I think it was Rose at the beginning that says we are in the data economy. The value of IoT is the data and what we can do with it. At Cisco Live in Berlin, they were printing t-shirts that said data is the new bacon. Right? It's all about the data, right? So how do we manage and control this, especially when it's in the whole zettabytes or petabytes? I mean, I'm sure almost many organizations here have petabytes. We have multiple at Cisco. You know, filers that have petabytes that take days to crawl. But now as an industry, we're above the zettabyte level. That's like lots of zeros out there. That's a lot of data lakes. And data governance is very hard to do. I'm not going to drain the slide, but it's very hard to do because you got to have a way to govern it. You have to have a way to secure the systems that it's on. And what is the data that the sensors are collecting? Where is it sending it? Right? And then you have to have a way to protect it. Yeah, it'd be nice to have encryption. The gentleman, Scott, that talked about that, the whole delay, the DTN, right? So is that a way to help us add more security? But as soon as you add security features to these sensors, it goes from a thumbnail to a gum pack in form factor, and that's too big. But it's about governing it. So some of the key tenets that we're looking at, think about this in IoT, is the key tenets of strong data protection. I'm not going to drain the slide because you'll have it, but the data protection standard or classifications, confidential, it's highly confidential, all that, are hard to do. How many people can really look at a document and go, well, is it confidential or highly confidential? You really need to think about in terms of data taxonomy, right? Is it about this is customer data? Is this company intellectual property? Is it entrusted data that someone gave our company to work with? Is it support? Is it support data? Is it telemetry data? And then knowing the taxonomy of that data would help us determine where we put it in terms of a classification and who can commoditize that data, right? So that's a good thing to do. She's telling me I got 1 minute, so it's good. So the last thing we have to do in less than 1 minute is adapt and mature our cloud models. I like what the gentleman said when cloud interface should be optional, not default. But how do you know it's all about the clouds? So we really need to scale our cloud engagements. Not only clouds that we use, clouds that we may build, hybrid clouds that we build and use internally and that we build and sell to customers, right? And we all have the hybrid model. So these are some things that you can do because IoT is about clouds, it's about applications, it's about APIs. So I'll leave you that with the stop slide didn't come up. But really it's about, you need some of the things that we can do to help us in the IoT. Implement extended teams. We need more boots on the ground. Be better at mastering the basics because now we have billions of devices. We're going to have much more billions. How do we know what these things are? How do we fingerprint? How do we monitor? How do we log? How do we defend? How do we do something like, you know, that device is not going to get on our network? We need to expand our accountability. Know what's on your network. Measure it. Minimize the attack surface by having more trusted products. Refuse to use things that have security vulnerabilities. If we all did that, well, maybe there's not much things in the world, but you know what? The people that are making things would make them more secure. Instrument the network. You need telemetry from everything. Be better at data management. Yeah, it's zettabytes. How do we do that? Right? How do we operate when there's really no privacy? And the gentleman's going to come up and talk about that and mature our cloud engagements. Thank you. Reading, and then probably no time for questions.
No, we'll definitely take a few questions. That is definitely an amazing presentation whereby we're able to look at the remediation for security. So do you want to take at least 1 or 2 questions or want to wait? Yeah, I think we should take at least 1 question.
Okay.
because our last speaker kind of went over, so we are trying to just allow a fairness here.
Yes. The speakers this morning talked about open standards, single standards for broad areas. And then now you were talking about minimizing the attack surfaces. It seems to me they were talking about maximizing the attack surfaces. Can you tell us how we strike a balance?
Yeah. So, am I still on? Yeah. So when I think about minimizing the attack surface, it's really about creating more secure products. You know by the DNA, whether there's a secure boot or there's anti-counterfeit technology, there's something in there that knows that your data can't be mucked with. Or if you think about sensors, now this hasn't been created, we need an open set of standards. What is the 5 things that every embedded sensor item must have? Right, you might talk about, well, how does it store passwords? What's the minimum default? What, I'm not on? Okay, the minimum default password, so those 5 things. So it's not about, we need openness within the Internet of Everything, but minimizing the attack surface is about knowing what you have, being able to monitor it. In some cases, it's about closing off, like, I'm not going to talk to that device because the security sucks, right? I can't control it. But you're going to have it. It's about building it in to minimize the attack surface so we can handle the maximum number of devices.
Thank you, Michelle.
Okay.